The twin suns of Valthera burned high in the orange skies, casting their relentless light over the endless expanse of wastelands. Once, this place had been vibrant, filled with life and prosperity. Now, it was silent, broken, and forgotten, much like Lyrian herself. She stood atop a jagged rock, her silver skin glinting faintly under the sun's rays. Her eyes, a deep violet, gazed over the barren land with a mix of sorrow and determination. The council's words echoed in her mind, sharp and unforgiving. "You are no longer Valtheri. You are an abomination, a destroyer of our kind. You will live in exile until the end of your days." Lyrian clenched her fists at the memory. It wasn't her experiments that had destroyed her people. It was their refusal to see beyond their own rigid traditions. The Valtheri prided themselves on perfection, and any deviation was seen as a crime. They had accused her of playing God when all she wanted was to save them. The genetic plague had swept through her people like a silent storm, targeting the young and old alike. It left no cure in its wake, only suffering. As one of the leading scientists, Lyrian had worked tirelessly to find a solution. But when the council refused to support her methods, she had taken matters into her own hands. Her invention, the Genesis amplifier, was meant to heal the plague by rewriting the damaged genes of the afflicted. The results were unexpected. Some Valtheri were cured, their bodies restored to perfect health. Others, however, experienced unintended mutations, elongated limbs, distorted features, and strange new abilities that terrified the unaffected. The council had been swift to act, declaring her a criminal and casting her into exile. Now here she was, alone in a wasteland that mirrored the emptiness in her heart. But Lyrian wasn't one to surrender to despair. Near the base of the rocky outcrop lay her makeshift laboratory. It was crude compared to the gleaming research centers he once worked in, but it was functional. Salvaged parts from old machines littered the area, while a cloaked beacon hummed softly in the corner. This beacon was her last hope, a distress signal sent into the void of space. She adjusted a panel on the beacon, her hands moving with practiced precision. It had been broadcasting for months, yet there had been no response. Still, Lyrian refused to give up. Somewhere out there, someone had to be listening. As she worked, a distant memory surfaced, unbidden. It was of her younger brother, Tyrell, his laughter bright and warm. He had been one of the first victims of the plague, his vibrant spirit dimmed by its cruel grasp. It was his loss that had driven her to defy the council, to risk everything for a cure. But in the end, she had only earned their hatred. A gust of wind swept through the wasteland, scattering fine orange dust across the lab. Lyrian brushed her long, silvery hair out of her face and tightened the seal on her cloak. She gazed up at the sky, wondering if her message was lost among the stars. Did anyone care about a fallen scientist from a dying world? Suddenly, a faint glimmer appeared in the distance. It was subtle, almost imperceptible, but it stood out against the barren horizon. Lyrian froze, her keen eyes narrowing. Could it be a trick of the light? A storm forming on the horizon? No. The glimmer grew brighter, steadier, and soon resolved into the unmistakable form of a spacecraft descending through the atmosphere. Her heart leaped, a mix of hope and fear flooding her veins. Who would answer her signal? And what would they want from her? Quickly, Lyrian activated the defensive perimeter around her lab, the makeshift energy field sparking to life. She grabbed a small handheld device, an old plasma cutter she had repurposed into a weapon. It was primitive compared to Valtheri technology, but it gave her a sliver of confidence. The spacecraft landed a few hundred meters away, kicking up a storm of dust. The design was unfamiliar, its smooth hull painted in dark tones with an emblem she didn't recognize. The ramp lowered with a mechanical hiss, and a figure emerged, a being she had never seen before. It was bipedal, clad in a lightweight suit that seemed more functional than ornamental. Its face was exposed, revealing smooth, pale skin and bright, curious eyes. Lyrian's breath caught. This was no Valtheri. The figure raised its hands in a universal gesture of peace. "I receive your signal," it said, its voice firm but kind. "My name is Ethan Calloway. I'm a human." Lyrian stood her ground, her weapon ready but her curiosity piqued. A human. She had read about their species in old archives. Bold, unpredictable, and far less advanced than the Valthari. Why would one of them come here? "I'm not here to harm you," Ethan continued, taking a cautious step forward. "I just want to know your story." For the first time in years, Lyrian felt something stir within her, a fragile spark of hope. Lyrian stared at the human named Ethan, her mind racing. She had spent so long in isolation, wondering if anyone would ever care about her story. Now, standing before her was a being from another world, ready to listen. A flicker of hope ignited within her, battling the shadows of despair. Ethan's bright eyes searched hers, filled with a mixture of curiosity and concern. He stepped closer, lowering his hands to show he meant no harm. "I've come to help you," he said earnestly. "I received your distress signal while surveying the area. I can't just ignore it." "Help," Lyrian echoed, her voice trembling slightly. "You have no idea what you're stepping into. I am an exile, a monster in the eyes of my people." Ethan shook his head, his expression unwavering. "You are not a monster. You're a scientist who wanted to save your people. I can see that in your eyes." Lyrian's heart raced as she processed his words. No one had spoken to her like that in years. In the eyes of the Valthari, she was a failure, a pariah. Could this human truly see her for who she was? "Please," Ethan continued, sensing her hesitation. "Tell me your story. I want to understand." With a heavy sigh, Lyrian lowered her weapon, the plasma cutter slipping from her grip and landing softly on the ground. She gestured for Ethan to sit on a nearby rock, and as he did, she began to share her tale. "I was once a respected scientist among my people," she began, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "I devoted my life to studying our genetics, especially when the plague struck. When my brother Tyrell fell ill, I knew I had to do something. I believed I could create a cure." As she spoke, memories flooded back. Tyrell's laughter, his dreams of exploring the stars, and the heartbreak of watching him suffer. "I created the Genesis amplifier. I thought I could rewrite the genetic code, save him and others. But the Council, they saw it as a threat. They feared what they didn't understand." Ethan listened intently, his expression never wavering. "What happened next?" "They called an emergency council meeting. I thought they would support me, but instead, they condemned me. The first trial was held in the Grand Hall, where I stood before them, begging for their trust. But they turned their backs on me. They said I had unleashed a curse upon our people." Lyrian paused, swallowing the bitterness that rose in her throat. "They exiled me to this wasteland, where I would live among the ashes of my failures. They think my technology is a danger, but I know it can be a cure. I just need a chance to prove it." Ethan's eyes sparkled with determination. "Then let's prove it together. I may not know your world, but I can help you get back to your people. We can show them the truth." Lyrian looked at him, her heart swelling with a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. "You would risk your life for me? A monster?" "Yes," he replied, his voice firm, "because I see you for who you really are, a brilliant scientist with a heart full of hope. You deserve a chance to heal your people." For a moment, Lyrian's defenses crumbled. She felt the warmth of acceptance, something she had yearned for. But doubt lingered in the back of her mind. What if they don't listen? What if they see you as an enemy? "Then we'll find a way to make them listen," Ethan said, his confidence unwavering. "I'm a commander. I'm used to facing challenges. We'll devise a plan." Feeling a sense of camaraderie she hadn't known in years, Lyrian nodded slowly. "Very well. But it won't be easy. The Council has eyes everywhere." Ethan smiled, the kind of smile that promised adventure. "I thrive on challenges. Besides, I have some tricks up my sleeve." Lyrian couldn't help but laugh softly. What tricks can a human have? More than you think, Ethan replied, a glint of mischief in his eyes. Now let's take a look at your technology. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we move forward. Together, they began to inspect the remnants of her research. Lyrian showed him the Genesis amplifier, explaining its inner workings and how it had been designed to rewrite genetic information. Ethan listened attentively, asking questions and offering insights from his own world's technology. As the sun began to set, casting a golden hue over the wasteland, Lyrian felt a flicker of excitement. For the first time in a long while, she had hope. A hope that maybe, just maybe, she could return to her people and prove that she was not a monster, but a savior. As darkness enveloped the land, Lyrian and Ethan continued their work, united by a common goal. With each passing moment, Lyrian felt the weight of her exile begin to lift, replaced by the promise of a new beginning. As the stars twinkled overhead, Lyrian and Ethan worked side by side in her makeshift lab. The air hummed with anticipation as they delved deeper into the Genesis amplifier systems. Lyrian explained the intricate details of her design, her passion shining through every word. This device, she said, gesturing to the gleaning machine, was meant to heal the genetic damage caused by the plague. It rewrites DNA, allowing the body to repair itself. She paused, her fingers brushing over the controls. But when it mutated some of my people, the council declared it a danger. Ethan nodded, absorbing her words. But you can fix it, right? You can make it work as you intended. Lyrian hesitated, the weight of doubt creeping back in. I can try, but I need access to a laboratory where I can conduct proper tests. I can't do it alone. And I don't know if my people will accept me back. Ethan placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. You won't be alone. I'm with you. Together, we can convince them. Let's make a plan. The next morning, as the first rays of sunlight broke over the horizon, Lyrian and Ethan began mapping out their strategy. They decided to head toward the capital city, where the council held their meetings. If they could reach the council chambers, they might present their findings directly to the leaders of Valthera. Lyrian drew a rough map in the sand, outlining their route. The city is heavily guarded. We'll need to avoid detection at all costs. Ethan studied the map, his brow furrowing in thought. What about disguises? If we can blend in, it might give us a better chance. Lyrian considered this. That could work, but the Valtheri will still notice anything unusual. We need to be careful. With a newfound sense of purpose, they set off, journeying across the wasteland toward the capital. Lyrian's heart raced with each step. This was a chance to reclaim her life and her dignity. As they walked, they shared stories about their worlds. Ethan spoke of Earth, a planet filled with diverse cultures, landscapes, and challenges. He described the thrill of exploration, the beauty of nature, and the friendships he had formed as a commander in the Terran space fleet. I've seen so many amazing things out there, he said, his eyes bright with excitement. But nothing compares to the beauty of genuine connection. Lyrian smiled softly, her heart warming at his words. You have a way with words, Ethan. I've only known the coldness of rejection for so long. It's refreshing to hear someone speak of connection. As the day wore on, they encountered obstacles, rocky terrain, sudden sandstorms, and the constant threat of Valtheri patrols. Each challenge tested their resolve, but they faced them together. With Ethan's strategic thinking and Lyrian's knowledge of her planet, they managed to navigate through each hurdle. One evening, as they camped beneath the stars, Lyrian sat by the fire, lost in thought. What if they don't believe me? She murmured, staring into the flames. What if they see me only as the monster they created? Ethan looked at her, his expression serious. You must remember that change is possible. People can grow, just as we have. If you show them the truth, they might see you for who you really are. Lyrian felt a surge of gratitude. Ethan had a way of lifting her spirits, even when doubt loomed large. Thank you, Ethan. You've given me hope when I thought all was lost. As the days passed, their bond deepened. They learned to rely on each other's strengths. Lyrian taught Ethan about the Valtheri language and customs, while he shared stories of Earth and its diverse inhabitants. They laughed, learned, and forged a friendship that transcended their worlds. But the journey was not without its dangers. As they approached the outskirts of the capital, the air grew tense. The streets were bustling with Valtheri citizens, their faces a mixture of fear and uncertainty. Lyrian's heart raced as she recognized the signs of unrest. "Something is wrong," she said, glancing at Ethan. "The council must be hiding something. We need to be careful." Ethan nodded, scanning the area for potential threats. "Let's find a place to blend in until we can gather more information." They ducked into a narrow alley, their hearts pounding as they listened to the chatter around them. Lyrian could hear whispers of the council's actions and the growing dissent among the Valtheri people. "I heard they're using the technology for their own gain," a voice said, filled with anger. "They don't care about us." Lyrian exchanged worried glances with Ethan. This was the moment they had to act. The council's authority was faltering, and if they played their cards right, they could turn the tide. With a shared determination, Lyrian and Ethan prepared to confront the council and reveal the truth. Together, they would fight for Lyrian's redemption and the future of her people. The narrow alley was alive with the murmurs of the Valtheri people, their faces a mix of fear and anger. Lyrian and Ethan pressed themselves against the cool stone wall, straining to hear every word. Each revelation only deepened Lyrian's resolve to confront the council. "I heard they're hiding the truth about the plague," one citizen said, his voice trembling. "They're experimenting on us. It's not just a cure, it's a weapon." Lyrian exchanged glances with Ethan, her heart racing. The council was using her technology for their own purposes, twisting her creation into something it was never meant to be. She had to act quickly before it was too late. "We need to find a way to the council chambers," Lyrian whispered urgently. "If we can expose what they're doing, the people might rally behind us." Ethan nodded, his expression serious. "But we must be careful. The council won't take kindly to any opposition. We need a plan." They retraced their steps, moving through the crowded streets as shadows lengthened. Lyrian's heart raced at the sight of the imposing council building in the distance. It loomed over the city like a dark cloud, a symbol of authority that had long oppressed her people. "Look," Ethan said, pointing to a group of guards stationed at the entrance. "We'll have to find another way in. Maybe through the back." Lyrian agreed, leading the way down a side street. The tension in the air was palpable, and she felt the weight of her past pressing down on her. This was her chance to reclaim her name, to show her people she was not a monster, but a savior. They crept around to the rear of the council building, where the shadows were deeper. Lyrian's heart pounded as she spotted a small door that appeared to be slightly ajar. "That could be our way in," she whispered. Ethan nodded, and they approached cautiously. Lyrian's breath quickened as they slipped through the door, finding themselves in a dimly lit corridor. The walls were adorned with ornate decorations, but Lyrian had no time to appreciate their beauty. They needed to reach the council chamber and reveal the truth. As they moved through the halls, they encountered a few council aides who looked up in surprise. Lyrian's heart sank. They couldn't be seen. "We have to be stealthy," she murmured. "Stick close to the walls." They hurried down the corridor, their footsteps silent against the polished floor. Lyrian's thoughts raced, recalling the layout of the building from her time as a scientist. They were nearing the council chamber when a familiar voice echoed through the hallway. "Where is that cursed device?" It was Councillor Thalos, the head of the council, known for his cold demeanor and ruthless ambition. Lyrian's stomach twisted with dread. "Keep moving," Ethan urged, pulling her into a side room just as Thalos and a group of guards strode by. Lyrian pressed herself against the wall, holding her breath as they passed. She could hear Thalos's voice clearly. "Those experiments must be contained. We cannot let the people know the truth. The Genesis amplifier is too dangerous." Lyrian's heart raced. Thalos was speaking about her invention as if it were a weapon, twisting her intentions to fit his agenda. The council was hiding the truth about the plague and manipulating the very technology she had created to save her people. Once the guards were out of sight, Lyrian and Ethan emerged from the room, their resolve stronger than ever. "We can't let them get away with this," Lyrian said fiercely. "We must expose them." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder. "We will. But first, we need to gather evidence. Let's find a terminal that has the council's records." They hurried through the halls, finally locating a small control room filled with screens and terminals. Lyrian quickly accessed one of the computers, her fingers flying over the keys as she searched for the data she needed. Come on," she whispered, her heart racing. After a tense moment, she found what she was looking for: files detailing the council's secret experiments using her technology. "This is it," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "With this evidence, we can show the people the truth." Ethan leaned over her shoulder, his eyes scanning the screen. "We need to download this data and get it to the people. They have to know." As they worked, the door suddenly swung open, and a group of guards stormed in. "Stop right there," one of them shouted, drawing a weapon. Lyrian's heart dropped. "Run," she yelled, grabbing Ethan's arm. They bolted for the exit, adrenaline pumping through their veins. The guards shouted behind them as they raced down the corridors. Lyrian's mind raced with possibilities. They had to get out and share the truth, but the guards were hot on their heels. Ethan glanced back, his expression tense. "We can't let them catch us. We need to split up." Lyrian hesitated, panic rising in her chest. "But we can't. Trust me," he insisted. "I'll create a distraction. You get the data to the people." With a heavy heart, Lyrian nodded. "Be careful, Ethan." They exchanged a determined look before darting in opposite directions. Lyrian sprinted down the hallway, clutching the data device tightly. She had to get the truth out before it was too late. As she raced through the building, her thoughts were clear. She was not just fighting for herself, but for all the Valtheri who had suffered under the council's rule. Lyrian dashed through the labyrinthine corridors of the council building, her heart racing with fear and determination. The echoes of her footsteps bounced off the walls as she navigated through the maze of rooms. Behind her, she could hear the shouts of guards, their heavy boots pounding against the ground in pursuit. "Think, Lyrian," she urged herself, her mind racing to find a way out. She needed to reach the heart of the city, where the people gathered to hear the council's proclamations. If she could get the truth to them, perhaps they would stand against the council together. She turned a corner and spotted a window leading out to a balcony. Without a second thought, she sprinted toward it. Lyrian flung the door open and stepped out into the crisp air. The view was breathtaking. The city sprawled below her with its vibrant colors and towering structures. But there was no time to admire the beauty. She needed to escape. Lyrian glanced down. The balcony was not far from the ground, but the drop would still hurt. Gathering her courage, she leaped over the railing, landing in a roll to soften the impact. She quickly scrambled to her feet, her senses on high alert. She spotted a narrow alley that led to the main square. If she could just reach the crowd, she could reveal the truth about the council's experiments. With renewed determination, she sprinted toward the alley, her breath coming in quick gasps. Meanwhile, Ethan was executing his own plan. As soon as they split up, he had led the guards away, darting down a different corridor. He could hear them shouting behind him, their frustration palpable. "Stop him," one of the guards yelled. Ethan ducked into a side room, barely making it inside before the guards turned the corner. He pressed himself against the wall, heart pounding as they passed by. "I need to buy Lyrian time," he thought, a plan forming in his mind. As soon as the guards were out of sight, he slipped out of the room and made his way toward the main entrance of the council building. He knew that if he could create a scene there, it would draw attention away from Lyrian. Ethan burst into the main hall, where several council members were gathered, discussing the latest updates. The moment he entered, all eyes turned to him. "You!" Councillor Fellows exclaimed, his voice filled with surprise. What are you doing here? Ethan took a deep breath, his mind racing. I have information that the Council is hiding from the people. You are using the Genesis amplifier for your own gain. Gasps filled the room as the Council members exchanged worried glances. How dare you speak such lies? Thelos thundered, stepping forward. I speak the truth, Ethan shouted, feeling the weight of the moment. You are experimenting on the Valthari, using their suffering for your own purposes. The people deserve to know what you are doing. At his words, murmurs spread among the council members. Ethan could see uncertainty flickering in their eyes, and he pressed on. If you won't tell them, I will. I'll make sure everyone knows what you are really doing. Thelos's face turned crimson with rage. Seize him, he commanded, but Ethan was already moving. He dashed back through the doors, ready to create a diversion that would keep the guards occupied. Back in the alley, Lyrian made her way toward the main square, where she could see the gathering crowd. Her heart raced with hope and fear. As she neared the edge of the square, she spotted a small platform that overlooked the area. Perfect, she thought, her eyes shining with determination. She climbed up onto the platform, her breath coming in quick bursts as she prepared to address the crowd. People of Valthera, she shouted, her voice ringing out over the noise. The crowd turned to her, their expressions a mix of confusion and curiosity. I am Lyrian, a former scientist of this council. I have come to reveal the truth. The murmurs grew louder as she continued. The council has been hiding the truth about the plague and using my work, the Genesis amplifier, for their own selfish purposes. They have twisted my creation into a weapon. Gasps rippled through the crowd, and Lyrian could see anger rising in their eyes. You have been kept in the dark while they experiment on you. They have turned my work into something dangerous. Suddenly, she heard commotion behind her. Turning, she spotted Ethan bursting onto the square, breathless but determined. Lyrian, tell them the truth, he shouted, his voice filled with urgency. With a nod of understanding, Lyrian continued. We have evidence. The council has tried to silence me, but I will not be silenced any longer. Just as she spoke, the guards who had been pursuing Ethan burst into the square, their faces filled with anger. Arrest them, one shouted, pointing at Lyrian and Ethan. But the crowd was already shifting. A wave of anger surged through the people as they realized the truth. We won't be silenced, one voice shouted from the back, echoing the sentiment of many. Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands. This is your chance. Stand with us against the council. They fear the truth, and they fear you. The crowd began to rally, voices rising in defiance. Down with the council, they shouted, their anger spilling over. Lyrian felt a surge of hope. This was the moment she had longed for. Together, we can fight for our future, she cried, her voice joining the chorus. The crowd surged forward, fueled by the truth and the promise of change. As the guards faltered, unsure of what to do, Lyrian and Ethan knew they had ignited a spark. The council's reign was beginning to crumble, and with it, the chance for a brighter future for the Valthari people. The crowd surged with energy as Lyrian stood on the platform, her heart racing. The faces around her were a mix of anger, confusion, and determination. The council guards hesitated, caught off guard by the sudden uprising. Lyrian, Ethan called out, standing by her side. We need to keep the momentum going. If we can gather more people, we can make a stand. She nodded, her voice steady despite the chaos. Everyone, listen. We have evidence that the council has betrayed you, using your suffering for their own power. They have been hiding the truth from you. As her words echoed through the square, more people began to gather, drawn by the commotion. Lyrian's heart swelled with hope. Together, we can fight for a better future. No more lies, no more secrets. A voice from the crowd shouted, What can we do? It was a young Valthari woman, her eyes filled with fear, but also courage. Lyrian stepped forward, her gaze sweeping over the growing crowd. We must unite. We can demand the council come forward and answer for their actions. They must face the truth. Ethan stepped beside her, adding, "And we can use this evidence. If we can get it to the people, they will see the truth for themselves." The crowd began to chant, "Truth, justice, freedom." Their voices rose in a powerful wave, and Lyrian felt a surge of strength flow through her. Suddenly, Councillor Phelos emerged from the entrance of the council building, flanked by guards. His expression was a mixture of rage and fear. "What is the meaning of this?" he shouted, trying to regain control. "Your reign of lies is over, Phelos," Ethan called back, his voice steady. "We know the truth about the Genesis amplifier. You will answer for what you have done." Phelos glared at Ethan, then turned to the crowd. "Do not listen to this traitor. He is lying to you. I am your council leader, and I will protect you." But his words fell flat against the rising tide of dissent. The crowd began to shout louder, their anger boiling over. "We want the truth." Phelos glanced nervously at the guards, realizing he was losing control of the situation. "You are all fools. You do not understand what you are doing. Then help us understand." Lyrian shouted back, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Reveal the truth. Show us what you've done." Phelos hesitated, sweat beading on his forehead. The council had always kept secrets, believing they could control their people through fear. But now, faced with a united crowd, he saw his power slipping away. "Enough," Phelos finally shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. The crowd's roar drowned him out, a chorus of anger and determination. Ethan stepped forward, his gaze unwavering. "You have deceived us for too long, Phelos. Your time is up. If you do not answer for your crimes, we will take this to the streets." As the tension thickened, Lyrian felt the weight of the moment. "Phelos," she said, her voice firm but steady, "the people deserve to know the truth. We deserve a chance to heal and rebuild. You have the opportunity to do the right thing." The councillor's eyes flickered with uncertainty, and for a brief moment, Lyrian thought she saw doubt. But then he straightened his posture, trying to regain his composure. "I will not be intimidated by you or your threats." With that, he raised his hand, signaling his guards to advance. "Arrest them. Do not let them spread their lies." But the crowd surged forward, united in their anger. "We won't go back," they shouted, pushing against the guards who had once controlled them. Lyrian could feel the strength of the people around her, their voices merging into a powerful chant. "Truth, justice, freedom." The guards hesitated, caught between their loyalty to the council and the rising tide of dissent. Lyrian could see the fear in their eyes, and she seized the moment. "Join us. You know the truth. Help us fight for what is right." Some of the guards exchanged glances, uncertainty flickering among them. One stepped forward, his weapon lowering slightly. "We've had enough of the lies too. We want to protect our people, not oppress them." With those words, a ripple of agreement spread among the guards. One by one, they began to lower their weapons, stepping aside to join the crowd. Lyrian's heart soared. This was the moment they had been waiting for. The people were rising up against their oppressors, and the council's grip was loosening. "Together, we can change everything." Lyrian cried, her voice ringing with hope. "Let's show them the power of unity." The crowd erupted into cheers, a wave of exhilaration sweeping through them. They were no longer just citizens, they were a force to be reckoned with. Ethan beamed at Lyrian, pride shining in his eyes. "You did it. You inspired them." But Phelos, realizing he was losing control completely, shouted, "This is treason. You will regret this." Lyrian turned to face him, her expression fierce. "No, Phelos. The only thing we will regret is allowing you to control us for so long." With a rallying cry, the crowd surged forward, their determination unyielding. They would no longer be silenced. They would fight for their future, for the truth, and for each other. As they advanced, Lyrian felt a surge of strength within her. This was her moment to reclaim her identity and lead her people toward a brighter tomorrow. The crowd surged forward, fueled by the energy of unity and purpose. Lyrian stood at the forefront, feeling a sense of belonging she had longed for. Together, they were ready to reclaim their future. As they approached the council building, the once imposing structure now seemed small and vulnerable. Councillor Fellows stood at the top of the steps, a look of desperation etched on his face. He raised his hands, trying to calm the crowd. "You are making a grave mistake. You don't understand what you are doing." Lyrian stepped forward, her voice steady and strong. "No, Thelos, it is you who does not understand. We have suffered in silence for too long. The truth must come out." Ethan joined her, standing by her side with determination. "Your lies will no longer control us. We demand accountability for your actions." The crowd echoed their support, chanting louder, "Truth, justice, freedom." The power of their voices resonated through the air, shaking the very foundation of the council's authority. Seeing the resolve in the crowd, Fellows faltered. He had always relied on fear to maintain control, but now, faced with the united front of the Valtheri people, he realized that his time was up. "You are foolish to believe you can change anything," he shouted, but his voice lacked conviction. A brave woman from the crowd stepped forward, her voice filled with conviction. "We are not fools, Fellows. We are the heart of this city. We want a future where our children can live freely, without fear of oppression." Lyrian felt a surge of hope as more voices joined in, each one stronger than the last. "We deserve better. We deserve to be heard." With each word spoken, the council's power diminished. The guards who had once stood firm began to lower their weapons, their loyalty wavering. The councillors, once untouchable, were now surrounded by a tide of anger and determination. Thelos's facade crumbled. "This cannot be happening," he cried, desperation seeping into his tone. "I am your leader. You cannot just turn against me." Lyrian raised her voice, addressing the crowd. "The only leaders we need are the ones who will stand with us for the truth. The council has hidden our reality for far too long. Let's build a new future together." The crowd roared in agreement, their spirits ignited. Lyrian could feel the energy of change crackling in the air. "Let's hold them accountable. We must demand justice for those who have suffered." With renewed determination, the crowd surged up the steps of the council building. Fellows stepped back, fear etched across his face as he realized he was outnumbered. "You will regret this," he shouted, but the crowd pushed past him, their unity unstoppable. As they entered the council chambers, the atmosphere shifted. The once sterile environment felt alive with potential. Lyrian stood at the front, looking at the council members who had betrayed her people. "We will not let your lies define us any longer," she declared. Ethan spoke next, his voice steady. "We have evidence of the council's wrongdoings, and we will make sure the people know the truth." He held up the data device, the key to exposing the council's actions. Lyrian stepped forward and connected the device to the main screen in the chamber. As the information began to display, gasps of shock rippled through the crowd. Images and documents flashed across the screen, detailing the experiments and manipulations the council had conducted. "This is the truth," Lyrian shouted, pointing to the screen. "This is what they have done to us." The crowd erupted into outrage, their voices rising in a chaotic symphony of disbelief and anger. "We will not be silent," they shouted, their unity stronger than ever. Seeing the shift in the atmosphere, the remaining council members exchanged panicked glances. Thelos's bravado faltered completely as the crowd began to chant for justice. "We demand justice," echoed throughout the chamber. Lyrian looked around at the faces of her people, filled with determination. "This is our moment. Together, we will create a new council, one that represents the people and fights for the truth." Ethan stepped forward, raising his hands to quiet the crowd. "We can do this. Let's come together and form a council of our own, one that listens to the voices of the Valthari. With a newfound sense of hope, the crowd began to organize themselves. They discussed plans for a new governing body, one that would focus on transparency and the well-being of the Valthari people. Lyrian felt a rush of pride as she watched them unite, working together to build a brighter future. As the sun began to set, casting a golden glow over the city, Lyrian knew this was just the beginning. They had faced the darkness of the council's deceit and emerged stronger. Together, they would forge a new path, one where truth and justice reigned. Together, we are unstoppable, Lyrian declared, her voice ringing out over the crowd. The cheers that followed filled her heart with joy. The Valthari people were no longer just survivors. They were warriors for change. As the crowd celebrated their victory, Lyrian took a moment to reflect on how far they had come. She had transformed from a figure shunned by her own people into a beacon of hope. In the eyes of the Valthari, she was no longer a monster. She was a hero, and together, they would create a legacy built on truth and unity. The dawn of a new era had begun, and with it came the promise of a brighter tomorrow.